There are a lot of different resources out there on the internet to explain how to make exams and how to enter questions into Blackboard. And so it's going to be worth our time to spend a little time doing that ourselves. But before we can make an exam, we need to talk about the different types of questions you can ask in Blackboard and spend a little time with some of the most common types and some of those that maybe you haven't thought of. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we can build an exam in Blackboard, we need to build a pool of questions. Now, you actually can start making an exam directly, and there's lots of discussion over whether it's better to use a test or a pool. But I'm going to make a case here today for making a pool of questions. And so let's start first by going down to Course Management Tools. And so we're not going to go into our folder yet. We need to build a pool of questions. And we're going to go in the Course Management tool. We're going to scroll down. We're going to open up Course Tools. Scroll down a little further, and down at the bottom we'll see Tests, Surveys, and Pools. Click on that. And we're going to build a pool. Okay, so what's the difference between a test and a pool? A test is something that is delivered directly into Blackboard, and you can make a test directly. You can go into your folder, make a test, and add questions to it. But the limitation really that is worth considering is that you can only ask those types of questions. You can only ask those questions on your test. Building a pool of questions gives you more versatility, in particular with the situation that you're now in where you are having to deliver a test online, probably as an open book or an open note test, because the testing center is not available, and ProctorU or online proctoring services like ProctorU are probably not going to be available as well, probably being overworked and certainly not going to be able to do all those tests. You're going to have to deliver some kind of assessment on their computer. Now, this involves potentially using a Respondus lockdown browser. We'll get to that in a later video. But there are ways of making the students prepare for an exam or quiz without having to resort to proctoring. So for instance, we can build a pool of questions. Let's say we build a pool of 100 questions, and we can give them a test of maybe 50 questions where it's randomly drawing questions from that pool. We can also time that test, and so two things are going to be helpful here. One, the timing of the test will help reduce the amount of time the students are getting to look up answers. And then by having a pool of questions, each student that takes the test is going to have a slightly different test. So they're not going to be able to compare tests to each other easily because of the fact that they're getting different questions. Alright, so we'll have that debate a little bit more as we get into future videos about the exams. In this video, we want to cover the different question types, and so I'm going to start with a pool, and I'm going to build a pool. So I'm going to click on Build a Pool, and I'm going to name this Module 4 Exam Pool. And I find it very useful to make sure I'm being very descriptive in my naming so that I can know what I'm looking at later on. In some of my classes, I may have upwards of 50 different pools that I'm drawing off: quiz pools, exam pools, lab exam pools, and so I definitely need to know what I'm looking at quickly. Otherwise, I spend a lot of time just trying to find what I need. This description and instructions here, this is really for you. Your students won't see this, and so I tend to leave it blank. So I'm just going to hit Submit. And now I'm at the place where I can start adding questions to my pool. Okay, and so I'm going to go through some of the different question types that you might want to add. So let's start with the most commonly used type of question, the multiple choice question. By clicking on multiple choice, it'll come up with a screen where you will add a question. So maybe this is a question you're going to ask about. You have to select from 4 different answers. So I'm just going to say this is a multiple choice question. With one answer. And so you would type in a question, and then they're going to select the correct answer there. So before I go on, I want to mention that it might be worth your time to put a question title here. Not that it's going to matter to the students so much, but this might matter to you. As you develop your tests more online in the future, it's best to mark your questions with things like chapter or section. That way you can make sure that when you're giving a test that you're asking questions on a particular area. So maybe this is from chapter 35, section 35.3. Maybe that's and so now I know the specific section that this question is coming from. That'll allow me later on to tailor my tests and making sure that I'm asking questions to hit all of my various objectives. But that again is perhaps something that you don't want to deal with now, and that's fine. But just kind of keep that in your back of your mind for future development. So maybe this is a question about plants. So let's see. Let's do a which of the following phyla lack vascular tissue. There we go. All right, so that would be my question I'm going to ask, and as I scroll down, I have a lot of different options. I can change the answer numbering. I can change the orientation, allow for partial credit, although I'm not sure why they have this on the single answer one, but you can change those options. I tend to leave those alone. Now, for different question types, I will change those, but not for this one. I can change the number of answers I have. I can have up to 100 different answers, and then they have to choose the correct one. So I'm going to leave it at 4. And so my answers are potentially phylum Bryophyta, which are the mosses. Let's see, phylum Coniferophyta, which are your pine trees. Let's add in the Cycadophyta, there we go. Phylum Cycadophyta, sorry if I misspelled that. And one last one. Let's see. There we go. All right, so I've given 4 options. The correct answer is Bryophyta, and so I want to make sure that that radial button is checked. If it was one of these other ones, I would want to check it, indicating the right answer. But it's the bryophytes. That's my correct answer. I can come down here and leave feedback. So this is feedback they would get if they get the response wrong, correct. This is feedback that they would get if they got the question wrong. I can also add metadata, categories, topics, things like that. If you're really developing these tests and spending a lot of time, it's well worth your time to do that. But of course, I don't believe that we have the time at this time to do that if we're trying to do this in a hurry. You can also add instructor notes to yourself. I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. Now if I wanted to create another multiple choice, then I would hit submit and create another, but I don't, and I'm going to just hit submit. As I come back to my questions, I can see now my question. I can view it by clicking on details, and I can see that it's on the right, it's on the correct answer. The green check mark will show me what the answer is supposed to be, and so I'm feeling good about that question. All right, let's take a look at some other ones. Let's take a look at true false. Pretty straightforward. This one's easy. I'm not going to do the question titles here anymore just because it takes extra time, but again, if that's something that you feel like you should do, I highly recommend that you do it. It's certainly easier up front than it is to try to go and figure that out after the fact. So true false, let's see, I'll use the phylum Cycadophyta have flagellated sperm. Now this actually is true, even though maybe you don't know what that is, but the answer is true. That's not the point. I've made a statement and then it's true, and that's it. I can also change the feedback. I can also add metadata, as you see there. I can have instructor notes, but I'm done with this question, and so that's a pretty easy one to put out there. The next types that are frequently used include the essay. as well as the short answer, which are pretty much the same thing. If I do an essay question here, maybe I have something like discuss the evolution of flowering plants. Now that's a very vague essay question, but you get the point. And then you just leave. Now I can write in what is going to be a good example of a correct response. They won't see this. They won't see this particular response until after they answer the question and turn in the test. Again, metadata, instructor notes, submit, and I'm done. Okay, a short answer is very, very similar to this, limiting the amount of things that the student can write, but it's very similar to the essay. The other types that are perhaps certainly very used a lot in face-to-face tests, but not as frequently in Blackboard. And there's kind of a good reason for that, and it has to do with the difficulty in setting it up, and that is the fill-in-the-blank question. Now the fill-in-the-blank question is pretty forward to set up, but administering a fill-in-the-blank can be a little bit exasperating as an instructor if you're not prepared or you did not set up the question correctly. Okay, so we're in a fill-in-the-blank question type. Now, with fill-in-the-blank, with just fill-in-the-blank, you only get one fill-in-the-blank response, and it's pretty easy to set up, right? So let's add a question here. Flowering plants are divided into two major groups: the monocots and then you can have a blank here. Now to determine that there's going to be a blank here, you use square brackets, and I can put 1, I can put A, I can put 5. It doesn't really matter. They're not going to see that part. Instead, it's just telling Blackboard that there's going to be a blank here and that there's an answer associated with the designation of 1. Okay. Now down here, here's the number of. We're going to get to the number of answers. Here's the answer, right? Answer in this case, it should be eudicots. Now, it should be eudicots just because of the way I've got the sentence structured. However, it's very likely that somebody's going to just put the singular version of this, eudicot, okay, which is fine. So to catch both eudicot and eudicots, plural, I'm going to have it contain this word. This means then that whether they put eudicot or eudicots, it will still be correct. Now, I could potentially make this case sensitive. I could also have multiple answers. Maybe even though I wouldn't personally, maybe you will accept a second answer in the form of dicot. And I would also make this a contain here, and that way, whether they put eudicot or singular or plural, or dicot singular or plural, it would accept both of those answers. And that's how that works. Now I will show you in a little while, I'll show you in a future video what it looks like to the student, but we've created a fill-in-the-blank question. Right? And so it looks like this in terms of how you see it, but the student will not see it this way. The student instead will see this question, and then we'll see a text box in place of this one where they will simply click and start entering in the answer. Okay, so we're ready to then move on to the next question type. So we've got a fill-in-the-blank. Let's look at multiple fill-in-the-blanks, and this works under the same principle as the fill-in-the-blank. We can do multiples of them, and this is one that I'm going to look at more closely in the next lecture to look at how to use images with this. But this is one where I can ask, so this might be question 1, and I'm going to have a blank. I'm going to give it a 1, and then question 2, and so on. And so I'm just doing generic questions here. What's going to happen is it's going to allow me to give an answer for each one of these, and I can go through the same process where I give multiple answers or have contains. And so in this example, I can also allow for partial credit would want to do that so that they don't, if they get one wrong, they don't get the entire question wrong. I'm going to click on next, and based on the number of brackets I have here, it'll allow me to give different answers. So answer 1, again, whatever that answer might be, answer 2, and maybe I have multiple answers that I accept for that one, and answer 3. Maybe answer 3 is one where it contains answer 3 in it, whatever it is. So again, I'm just giving you the generic form of this, but you would have to have an actual question here and an actual answer here. Okay, so that is your multiple fill in the blank, and you can add feedback, you can add metadata and instructor notes, but I'm just going to hit submit. Okay, let's take a look now at another one that is kind of interesting. Not many people use this question type, and that is the hotspot. And the hotspot involves an image and having the students select a part of that image or click on a particular part of the image. And you're not going to add the image here in the question text. Instead, you're going to add the image down here. You're going to upload an image, which is different than the other question types. So I'm going to, in this case, since I know which image I'm going to use, I'm going to have the students click on the micronucleus in the image below. Okay, and I'm going to upload my image. Now I added this alternate text before, so I'm going to browse. I'm going to use this image of a paramecium. I know what it is. You don't know what it is yet, but when you click over here, you'll see that this is the image I'm using. And so I've asked them to click on the micronucleus, and the way this works is you can use a square box to highlight the area you want them to click. So you start from the upper left coordinate, drag over to the bottom right coordinate. Now it's not perfect. I don't get to draw directly around the edges of that structure, but it's still pretty good in this case. And so to answer this question, students are going to have to use their mouse and click on that micronucleus to get credit for that. So if they click outside of that box, they will get it wrong. And so I can add feedback, I can add metadata and so forth, but I'm done with this question. I'm going to hit submit. And again, I can go and review what this looks like. Here's what that question looks like, and they're going to be directed to click somewhere on this image, in this case the micronucleus. Okay, so we've done a variety of different question types. I also will use matching and ordering. I like to use those for different situations. Let's take a look at matching. Matching is pretty straightforward as well once you kind of get used to the layout here. So in this case, let's say I'm talking about a cell and its organelles. So I might say match the cell organelle with its function. And I'm going to create these pairs down below. As I go down, I can allow for partial credit. I could even allow for negative scores of incorrect answers, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to have 4 pairs of matching, and if I want more, I can add up to, I believe it's 100. Yeah, I can add up to 100 pairs. So let's say that my first one is cilia, and I'm going to grossly understate some of these things and some of their functions. I'm going to use movement as its function. Now again, obviously cilia can be used for a variety of different things, but you'll get the point as to why I'm doing this in just a moment. So cilia is one. Maybe I say mitochondria as another, and I shouldn't have said organelle. I think I should have said, to be more clear, cell structure, because cilia is not necessarily an organelle. So cell structure, there we go. Now I feel better about the question. I'm going to go back down. I've got cilia and movement. I've got mitochondria, and I would say here it helps convert. Well, I don't want to get too long here because then it starts to look weird in matching. But I'm going to say powerhouse of the cell. I know some of you out there are looking at it, go, that's totally the wrong answer, but again, that's not the point. Then let's use flagellum, and maybe my answer is also motion. Okay, now I could type motion here, but then it's going to be weird because the students are going to be confused about which motion they should associate with which structure. So in this case, I'm going to reuse an answer choice, and it pops around here a little bit. So there's flagellum, and I can select the answer from question pair 1 because it's also motion. And that way, motion is only going to show up once in the matching box, and they can select it multiple times. And then the last one, let's say Golgi apparatus, and I'll say its function is to package proteins. Alright. I can also add dummy answers, those answers that are not going to be used, and I'm going to add, in this case I'm going to add an unmatched answer choice. I'm going to add one of them, and so maybe as I have to go back all the way down to the bottom to find the dummy answer, and it's right here below 4. And let's say in this case I'm going to add makes messenger RNA. Okay, and so it's not a correct answer, but it's going to be added to my list. And it did this to me before. It added 2 for some reason. So transcribes a messenger RNA. It doesn't really matter. I've gotten 2 dummy answers, and so as I look down here at the bottom, I can either have these randomly assorted, or I can change the answer choice. So here's answer choice 1 and the answer, but I can move these around manually so that I can scramble up the choices, or I can just have it random. And I like the random option myself. I don't like to think about it. Plus the fact it'll make it random for different students, and it'll look different for different students. So you can see I can add response feedback, I can add metadata, I can add instructor notes, but I'm done. I'm going to hit submit, and I've got a nice matching question, and you can see kind of what that looks like. Finally, I will use ordering, and it's worth talking about ordering because ordering can be useful. For instance, when you want to put events in order, maybe it's the events of a particular reaction, maybe it's geologic events, which I use sometimes, but you can, one of the things that you need to do is you need to instruct them where to start. So you might be something like list the, or I should say, yes, list the geologic events in order from oldest to new to more recent. There we go. Okay, and then I can list those, and so I have 4 answers, and I want to say that what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the answers in the correct order. So I'm just going to start with a 4 here. And let's say that my events are Cambrian explosion. Oh, let's see. Decline of the dinosaurs. Let's see. Trying to think of more recent, I guess, migration of humans out of Africa, and let's see, what's a development of agriculture. All right, all events, I've got them in the right order, and I can then, when I hit next, I will go to, I can change, even though this is the correct order, then I can go and physically change the order I want it displayed in. And as a result, they're going to have to, when they get the question, they're going to go next to the answer, and they're going to have a little drop-down box to select it as 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay. And so it's a pretty simple, and we'll hit submit, and we're done. So those are the different types of questions that I might use frequently. In the next video, I'm going to explore using these question types, or at least some of these, with images. I think I'm going to focus, for instance, on using images for, say, a multiple fill-in-the-blank question where I can label an image, for instance, and I might do that for, say, multiple choice. And so those are going to be useful ways of being a little bit more dynamic in my question making. So we'll spend some time with that next time. Also, it'll go over the process of how to upload images and also how to modify an image simply so that it can be used. And so there's going to be a few things we're going to talk about in the next video that you're going to want to pay attention to, because if you don't do this correctly, you're going to run into some unanticipated problems, and we'll discuss those in the next video. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this, and I will talk to you soon.